Developed and published by Capcom, Dino Crisis is a survival horror video game created by the master himself, Shinji Mikami of Resident Evil fame, and it was released on July 1st, 1999, originally for the Sony PlayStation. For the purpose of this review, I played through the Dino Crisis Classic REbirth mod patch on the PC. I will link everything appropriately in the description below. I remember when Resident Evil 3 Nemesis came out a few months after Dino Crisis. I got both games the same day, and they had each other's demo discs in them. I still have my original copies in my collection, but sadly the demos were given away. When I was younger, I actually only really played the demo disc for Dino Crisis and never got very far in the retail version. Mostly is because of my gaming ADD back then, and the setting didn't quite grip me as much as Resident Evil's did. But as time passed, I decided it was finally time to rip through Dino Crisis. The long and short of the story is that the secret Operation Raid team sends some squad into this research facility on the Ibis Island where the nutjob scientist Dr. Edward Kirk is lurking around, though he is originally reported dead some years earlier, and he is now working on a secret weapons project. You take control of the red-haired heroine Regina, along with partners Gale, Rick, and Cooper, the latter of which doesn't last too long, in an effort to track down Dr. Kirk. I'll let the rest of the story unfold from there, and I will admit that the explanations and twists in the story were quite interesting and they did grip me. Dino Crisis is very much on the whole like Resident Evil. The patented tank controls are present, it's wise to conserve your ammo, there's tons of puzzles, and while the backgrounds aren't pre-rendered, rather in this game they are created with an original real-time 3D engine, everything kinda has that Capcom-y survival horror look and feel. One of the more intriguing aspects of Dino Crisis is actually its soundtrack and sound effects. I feel they did an amazing job with the effects in creating a brooding and oppressing atmosphere, while taking sort of a, not sure how to put it, but kind of a risk in the sense of having a somewhat janky and spastic soundtrack, especially during the scenes of tension. But for what it's worth, my favorite track in the game is somewhat traditional in that of the save rooms. It's really not out of line to say that Dino Crisis, at its core, is essentially an advanced semi-futuristic Resident Evil with dinosaurs type of game, while being just enough different to set itself apart from the historic franchise. There are three major differences in Dino Crisis from that of Resident Evil that I feel should be addressed. First, it is somewhat simple. In order to save, you have the ability to do so while you walk in and out of designated save rooms throughout the island and facilities. Secondly, instead of having a free-to-use item box near the save spots, Dino Crisis replaces that with an item box system, which uses in-game items called plugs in order to unlock. There are green, red, and yellow boxes, of which vary by the contents inside. Lastly, the biggest difference between Dino Crisis and the Resident Evil games are the puzzles. There are a lot of puzzles, some of which can be very frustrating to get the hang of. Anyone that watched my livestream on Twitch can attest to my struggles. Also, depending on which in-game routes and decisions you take, you can end up with even more puzzles. I swear at one point during my playthrough I was doing a puzzle every 5 to 10 minutes. I hate to make this review seem like it's Dino Crisis vs Resident Evil, but I mean, you kinda have to compare them, don't you? And while I applaud Capcom for taking some risks while keeping the general formula similar to that of which falls for them into the limelight, I do take exception to some of the changes as I feel they do hinder the game's general flow and replay value. I don't mind puzzles. If I hated them completely, I wouldn't like nearly any of the games Capcom came out with during this era. In saying that, Dino Crisis goes way above and beyond shoehorning puzzles into the fold. I mostly chose certain routes in the game that apparently didn't have more puzzles, and I'm so glad that I did. Call me stupid, lazy, or what have you, but to me there's simply too many and that's just my preference. My other major gripe is regarding the mixing process for both healing items and ammunition. I feel that in general it's not explained super in-depth in-game, making it somewhat confusing to someone who's just trying to play the game completely blind. I found myself constantly just mixing stuff together to create item space at times and not really knowing what the end results would be. Perhaps it would be easier if I had my manual on me, but I kinda just went with the flow and I forgot about it. In saying that, Dino Crisis is a solid game, and I'm incredibly grateful to have been able to experience it with such high quality mods on the PC. It does deserve its place near the upper echelon of the survival horror genre. However, the aforementioned gripes that I had keep it from being an all-time classic in my eyes. I give Dino Crisis a 7.5 out of 10. I recommend this game to anyone who loves survival horror, dinosaurs, or just wants to play something different. I will be playing through Dino Crisis 2 and 3 eventually, but before then, Capcom, if you're listening, feel free to remake this bad boy sometime soon. I think with a modern engine and some gameplay tweaks, like maybe removing a few of the puzzles, a remake could go a long way and potentially revitalize a dead franchise that I know has a great following. Until next time.